Hello everyone, welcome back to The Budget Sportsman. Thank you so much for joining me on today's video. Here in central Pennsylvania, it is starting to look a lot like spring is right around the corner. And with spring comes all of the fun activities that I love to do in the outdoors, starting with trout season, then turkey season, then camping and backpacking and fishing in the summer, and then back into the deer woods, or maybe this year even the elk woods in the fall. And one of my favorite parts of all of those outdoor activities is being able to cook in the outdoors, to have a nice meal in the outdoors when I'm done with a long day of hiking or when I'm hunting or whatever it is, just to be able to make a nice warm meal and not just be eating peanut butter and jelly all the time. And so what I want to do today is talk to you about some budget stove and pot options that if you enjoy cooking like I do in the outdoors, that will get you out there and get you cooking in the outdoors. Everything from some DIY stoves that are going to cost you next to nothing to some more a little bit higher end stoves, but that are still extremely budget friendly for the category and in comparison to the competition. Some of these down in this end we're going to talk about later in the video, but they are direct competition to jet boils, but at a much better price point, and we're going to talk about some of those in a minute. So let's clear off all these stoves and let's dive into them one by one and kind of go through the progression of some of these different stoves, advantages and disadvantages of each. So one of the first stoves that I started to use when I was really starting to spend more time in the outdoors was the DIY soda can stove, or the alcohol stove. And I was serving as a missionary in Micronesia at the time, and while we could get a lot of stuff from Amazon, it took a while and usually was expensive. And so for me, I was on a tight budget, and I found out about these soda can stoves and I started making them, and they are just a ton of fun. All you need is super cheap. You need 2 soda cans of the same size. You need a pair of scissors or a knife to cut the cans. You need a couple staples, and you need either a drill bit or even a thumbtack just to make the holes in the top of your burner. And so I used these for quite a while. One of the advantages is that they're super lightweight. If I throw this kind of basic one here, standard size 12 ounce cans there, it comes in on my scales at 0.3 ounces, sometimes 0.4 ounces. This scale doesn't seem to be too precise with such a light weight on there, but super lightweight. Now, I made this pot stand and windscreen out of a tin can. It's a bit heavier. It's actually the heavier part of the component there, coming in at 1.9 or 2 ounces there. So still, you're just a little bit over, 2, maybe 2.5 ounces total for a stand and a pot support. And then I would use something like this pot here. I don't even know what brand it is, or I would use this MSR pot. This is the MSR Seagull. I would use one of these. And all you do is you just put some fuel down in the center, light it up. It'll eventually get hot and start getting flames out of these rings up here. Have it down inside your pot support, put your pot on, and you're good to go. So what are some of the advantages and disadvantages of the DIY alcohol stove? Well, first of all, like I said, it's super cheap, it's super fun to play around with, and they're super lightweight. The fuel is readily available. You just need kind of any kind of, I should say any kind, but basically some form of alcohol. Denatured alcohol works really well. You can use something like grubbing alcohol or isopropyl alcohol, depending on exactly what it is. Sometimes they don't burn as clean or burn as hot, but denatured alcohol works really well. I use this heat, and you can get this at Walmart. You can get it at most car part stores. It's readily available, and it's pretty cheap. I think it's less than $3 for a bottle of this stuff. So those are some of the advantages. Now, some of the disadvantages are that there's no heat control on this. Whatever you get is what you get. There's no way to really simmer. Another thing is fuel storage. Now, it can be an advantage that you can take the exact amount of fuel that you need to take on a particular trip if you learn how to measure it out. But I never knew how to carry the fuel. This bottle doesn't really, it leaks after you open it the first time. The top doesn't seal up real well. So I would carry it in a Gatorade or water bottle, but then I was always worried about drinking this clear liquid. So I had to make sure I marked it with this red tape and put heat fuel on it so I knew what it was. It just, I don't know, it's kind of an inconvenience. It's a great way to get started, especially if you're on a budget. I mean, you can make your own pot stand, make your own stove for next to nothing, and just pick up a pot and a little bit of fuel, and you'll be good to go. Eventually, I kind of wanted something that was a little bit more versatile, and so I'll show you what I moved to next. So the next stove that I moved to was a canister stove. And there are a ton of different kinds of canister stoves, all different models, all different makes, all different shapes and sizes, but there are a ton of them that are actually pretty much the same, and they're just sold under different brand names. This one is one of those, and it came from Amazon. I think I paid like $12 or $13 for it. Sometimes you can get it for under $10. And this is super nice. I've had really good success and really enjoyed using this stove. One of the advantages is that once you put it on the canister, you do have this control knob where you can actually simmer. So if you want to do more than just boil water, you actually want to do some cooking, you can do that with this. This particular model has an igniter built in, so I just open up the valve, hit the igniter, and I am cooking. And then again, I can turn that way down. You probably can't hardly see that, but there it is. It's cooking. That's way low. And so you can simmer all you want. So that's really, really handy. You're not measuring out fuel. You're not wasting fuel like with the soda can stove if you put too much in or running out of fuel too early. This is a lot more convenient. I've really, really enjoyed this. As far as the weight of the stove itself, it's really not too bad. This one weighs in, let me throw it over on the scales for you. It's weighing in right at 3.3 ounces. You can get lighter ones. They make some that are titanium, but usually they don't have the igniter in them, so that's something to consider. But for me, for 3 ounces and the convenience and just the ease of using this system, I have really, really enjoyed this system. Now, what are the downsides of this? Well, you're definitely carrying some convenience weight, let's call it. So if you do care about weight, you are going to be carrying a little bit of extra weight because these canisters they're fairly heavy. Another disadvantage is that unless you bring this back and weigh it and you kind of know what the gross weight and net weight is, there's really not a great way to tell what's in here. And so a lot of times people just go out and buy new canisters and end up with a bunch of half-used canisters on the shelf. Now, while they tell you you're not supposed to refill these, you can get adapters, and I have one that I just use my half-used canisters and refill this one, and always have a full canister before a trip, so that's pretty nice. But you are going to be carrying some weight for that. Now, as far as pots, I mean, you can use any pot you want. This pot is, I guess, an off-brand pot. I'm not even sure what it is. That pot's coming in at about 9.5 ounces. The one I've used a lot, this is a little bit smaller. This one, if I'm going with more than one person, this is an MSR Seagull, but this is a heavy pot coming in at 15.5 ounces. But I've used this a lot, and I can put my canister, my stove, a lighter, my cup, all in this pot, and that works pretty well. But recently, I was looking for a little bit of a lighter weight option as far as pots go. I was happy with the stove, and I came across this pot, which you can get at Walmart for $15. And it's a little bit taller profile, but it actually really works well. It does boil water a little bit slower than these other pots because these have more surface area, and the same amount of water is going to be a thinner layer of water, whereas this is going to be deeper water. So it does take a little bit longer to boil, but it works just fine. And what I really love about this is if you're looking for like sort of a budget-friendly but yet somewhat ultralight and compact maybe backpacking setup, this is awesome because these smaller 110 gram canisters, it will actually fit down inside of there, and then you can throw your stove down inside of there if you fold it up, and boom, you have got a really sweet little backpacking setup there. I should weigh this for you. This is with the canister in it. Now the canister is not full, but that's weighing right around 1 pound. So with the canister and with the stove, I'm weighing about the same as this pot over here weighed all on its own. Let me pull this out and weigh the Stanley Pot for you. Oops. It is a tight fit for that canister. The Stanley Pot with the lid weighs 7.7 ounces. So this isn't the lightest thing on the market for sure, but for $15 at Walmart, and again, now Walmart's selling these, so for about 30 bucks, you could probably go and get a really nice sort of middle of the road, but somewhat ultralight setup. Now, eventually, or I should say recently, I kind of started to move on from this style of stove for one primary reason, and that is because twice over the last year, I spilled either food or hot drink with this setup. Now in here, when I'm on a table, this seems pretty stable, but when I'm out, you know, I'm on the sticks and the leaves and on level ground, and I'm using the smaller canister. Again, you can get a bigger canister. It's a wider diameter. It's going to be more stable, but for the sake of weight and space, I usually carry the small one. And then you put this bigger pot on it. I spilled ramen once, and I spilled my hot chocolate once. So the first thing I was considering was just getting a canister support, and I'll show you again those in just a minute. That was the first thing I was considering, but then I also really started considering a jet boil, because a jet boil, the pot actually locks onto the stove, so it's going to be a lot harder to have that stove, you know, actually like slide off and sliding around. However, I never was really that big of a fan of jet boils because of the price. They're very expensive, and they definitely are heavier. So I started doing some research on maybe some jet boil alternatives, and I found several, in fact, a bunch. But I've got 3 of them here to show you today, so let me clear this off and show you some of these jet boil alternatives. So what I have in front of me now is 4 different pot and stove combinations that are all of the jet boil style, and they're from 3 different companies. I have 2 here from the same company. Now, these are all very similar to the jet boil style stove. They may not boil quite as quickly as the jet boil, but they have the same functionality, and these pretty much all boil water faster than the stove system that I just showed you that I use a separate pot with. Now, one thing to be aware of is that prices are going to fluctuate on these. I'm not really going to give you prices, but you can check out Amazon, eBay, AliExpress, and of course the manufacturer's websites. And I'll put a bunch of links down in the description. Another thing to be aware of is that I have 4 different size pots here from these 3 different companies, but most of these companies sell pots in various sizes. So don't assume that just because I have a certain pot from a certain company that that's the only size that they make. Pretty much all these companies make in various sizes. So let me clear these off and let me go through them one by one and kind of talk about some of the pros and cons of each one. So the first one up on the table here is the BLUU Mount. Now, I have to say, camo is cool. So I really like the BLUU Mount for that reason. And BLUU is spelled B-L-U-U, by the way. And so this is a really cool stove. It's the biggest one that I have, I believe, as far as the pot capacity. It's 1.4 liters all the way to the top, and I think about 1.1 liters of usable volume there. Let's get a weight on it. With all the accessories it comes with, it's coming in at 1 pound, 1.7 ounces. 1 pound, 1.7 ounces. So just under 1 pound, 2 ounces. One thing I appreciate about this, the handles are coated in rubber. They fold in tight for storage, and they fold out to give you a nice grip on your pot. The neoprene coating keeps it nice and cool when it gets hot. And then the lid here is a silicone lid. On this side, it's got strainer holes, and on this side, it's got a place to drink from. So if you're doing hot chocolate or coffee, not going to burn your lips on the hot container. You can put the lid on and drink right out of it, just like a mug. One thing I'll say about that is this is a pretty big pot to be drinking out of like a mug. Then I'll show you what comes with it. It comes with the stove itself, which again has an igniter built in. It has a valve where you can control the heat. And then it also has a canister support. So this is really cool. You can snap your canister onto it. And all of these stoves that I'm showing you pretty much all come with the same accessories. This is a little tricky sometimes to get it snapped in, but let's see. There we go. We got it snapped in, so you can snap that onto your canister and give you a lot more support. Then you have your stove here, which would go on top of your canister. And then what happens is this just pretty much goes on top of there, and it actually locks in place. So when this is screwed onto the canister, you're going to be able to pick up everything all together, and that's really, really cool. Now, if you wanted to cook with a different kind of a pot as opposed to the pot that comes with it, they give you this canister or this pot support, and so you can just bring this along with you, and that sits right down there onto your stove. And then you can take one of these pots like this, and you can cook with any kind of a skillet or pot that you want and not be bound just to this kind of a pot. So that is the BLUU Mount. The next two I'll pull up on the table are both from the same company. These are both from FireMaple. The green one here is called the Fixed Star 2. Let me turn it around. And this is the more budget-friendly of the two, and this one is called the Polaris. Now, these look really similar, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time addressing the differences. The Polaris is a little bit bigger, but the Polaris also has a pressure regulator, and this one right here is the fastest stove that I tested of all of these. I should have mentioned the BLUU, I think, would boil water in about 3 minutes. This FireMaple Polaris was boiling them in under 2.5 minutes for about a half a liter of water, whereas the X2 here was up a little bit over 3 minutes to boil that water. Now, one of the things about both of these FireMaples is that they have this really cool lid system. Now, you pay for it in weight, but it's got a really great handle. It snaps in place, so it gives you a really nice way to pick this whole pot up. It feels a lot easier to pick up and a lot more sturdy than the smaller handles on some of the other pots here. It does give you a hard plastic lid. This is not a soft lid, and there's no drinking holes in it. And there's really no way to snap it on like the other one. This one, when you close it, on both of these, it's got this little wire tab here that you pull up and you close it, and so it's not going to go anywhere. But again, both of these have that pretty much that same system. The Polaris, let's throw it on the scales with all the accessories that come with it, which are pretty much the same for all of these. That's coming in at 1 pound 6 ounces. So definitely a little bit heavier. And the X2, the Star X2 is 1 pound 5 ounces. So both of these have a little bit more going for them in the way of weight. If you're just looking for the fastest boiling time that you can get, then this Polaris is probably going to be the way to go. I mean, it is fast if you're willing to sacrifice that weight. Again, let me show you the things it comes with. It comes with a matching colored stove here. Again, you've got a nice pressure regulator. You get the canister support here as well. Again, color matched. And again, you get a pot support if you're wanting to cook with a different pot. The FireMaple X2 here, the Star X2, is the same. You get all the same accessories, but you do, they're going to be colored accordingly to the pot. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that even though these are the same brand, they are not interchangeable with stoves. So the X2 here will not fit on the Polaris. It fits, but it won't lock into place. It's a little bit too small on this ring, and vice versa. The Polaris will not even fit down inside the stove for this Star X2. But the FireMaples here, as far as the advantages, I mean, the handle system is the big advantage. It is so nice. And there is something nice about the little pull tab that you get for the top of the pot lid here on both of the FireMaple stoves. Now, one last thing I wanted to point out about the FireMaples is that they both have enough width and circumference to fit one of these larger 220 gram gas cylinders here. You might have to play a little bit of Tetris, but on the Polaris, it's actually going to fit in no problem, and I've got it all nested just fine. Now on the X2, while it is wide enough to fit down inside the pot, it's not quite narrow enough to fit down inside the actual stove ring inside of there to let it really seat all the way down. So you're going to probably not be able to nest that canister in this particular stove, even though it fits part way down. Now you might be able to play some Tetris and figure it out. I wasn't able to, but the 110 gram cylinder is going to fit in there just fine. Now the last stove on the table here is the APG stove, and I got this from AliExpress for around $40. This stove is the smallest one, as you can see, that I had here. The BLUU was about 1.4 liters total capacity, or about 1.1 working capacity. Both of the FireMaples are around 1 liter or 1.1 liters working capacity. This has a 750 milligram working capacity. Again, some of the other brands sell one like this, but for me, this particular size is really sweet. I'm able to throw this in a backpack. For backpacking, it's more along the range of something that I'm actually willing to carry. Let's throw this on the scales. We're getting a weight right at 1 pound, so it's very comparable with some of the other systems. Probably the lightest stove of this style. Again, you're getting all of the same stuff, and this one is very, very similar to the BLUU. You're getting a very similar silicone lid with straining holes and a drinking hole. Again, you get the pot support for cooking with other kinds of pots. You get the stove, and you get the canister support in here. Now, one of the really interesting things about the APG is that, of course, you're never going to fit the 220 gram cylinder in there, but if you know how to play Tetris just right, you can actually nest this with the 110 gram cylinder, and you've got a great little system ready to go with the cylinder, 1 pound, 5.5 ounces. The cylinder's not full, but you get the idea. All right, so let's recap real quick. Over here, we have the soda can stove, super cheap, super fun to play around with, readily available fuel, really lightweight, but carrying the fuel can be a bit of a pain, and you can't adjust the heat so you have no simmer. Next up, we have the super basic canister fuel stove, and man, I've loved this one. I've used it for several years, quite a bit. Really loved it, really enjoyed it. Really the big reason why I've moved on from it is that it's kind of easy to knock the pot off, and you're either going to burn yourself, lose your supper, whatever. But a stove like this paired with a $15 pot from Walmart is going to be a great budget way to get started, probably under $30, and you have hardly any weight at all. Moving on to these stoves on this side, they're like jet boils, they're fast, and you have a really good sturdy platform. You can't knock that thing off. You have the canister support there, and you've got a really great stable platform with really fast boil times. And with some of these, you can drink right out of them, and you get a lot of convenience. You can hold them when they're hot. They're just so convenient. And yes, you're going to sacrifice weight, but to me, this is pretty much what I'm going to be moving quite frequently moving forward. I will probably still use this sometimes if I'm super worried about weight on some longer backpacking trips. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it was informative. I hope it maybe revealed some products to you that you didn't know were on the market. I'm going to leave links for a lot of this stuff down below. Feel free to go down and check it out. Also, feel free to go down in the comments and let me know what you thought of this video. Maybe let me know about what's your favorite kind of stove or what's your favorite kind of food to cook when you're out in the outdoors. Until next time, remember to get off YouTube and get outdoors into God's great creation.